she stops with her rostrum, her nose, about 18 inches from my hands, from either side of my hands. If I closed my hands together, I could have placed them on either side of her rostrum, and she just stopped.
Welcome to Experiences You Should Have, your how-to guide for amazing experiences. I'm your host, Gail Manasco, and today we are going to be talking with Susan Bird about swimming with humpback whales. Now, Susan is an experienced professional with whales and dolphins, and she is also a personal empowerment coach who assists clients to clarify their life purpose and express their full potential. So she does a lot of energy work, and if you ever meet Susan, you will just feel just that amazing energy that radiates from Susan. She is just an incredible woman, and I actually met Susan, gosh, it was about 5 years ago on a live aboard dolphin trip. So we spent a week on a boat with maybe 15 other people in the middle of the ocean in the Bahamas, and we swam with wild Atlantic spotted dolphins for a week. It was incredible, absolutely incredible. And my husband actually lost his wedding ring on that trip, and we just think that the ring is now one with the dolphins at the bottom of the ocean. I think it's kind of nice, actually. He did get a new ring. However, I met Susan on that trip, and I just thought that she would be the perfect person to have on this show and really talk about swimming with humpback whales. And she swims with all kinds of whales, but she does help lead trips to swim with these amazing gentle giants. And I hope to do this trip in our near future, maybe the next few years. But Susan will share her own story of swimming with these amazing creatures, as well as a how-to guide to make this happen, which includes costs, what you need to bring, your type of gear, best time to go, how to book, etc. We have it all for you. So stay tuned and enjoy the show. Today, we're talking about humpback whales. And you are the expert, I feel like, of humpback whales.
I laugh at that. I wouldn't call myself the expert. I've spent a number of hours in the water with them. And so I feel that I know them in a different way than, say, a scientist who studies them. Put it that way.
Okay, true. But you are very in tune with humpback whales and dolphins. And could you share with our listeners about one of your favorite experiences of swimming with humpback whales?
Well, I've been thinking about this, and one of my very favorite experiences dates back, I want to say 1999. I was leading a small group of people down to swim with humpback whales in the Dominican Republic. And at that time, I was just getting started doing it. And the people that I chose were friends and a couple of clients from my healing business. And we had one of the small tenders. Each live aboard boat has 2 tenders, and it's usually 8 to 10 people per small boat when you go out and actually kind of motor among the whales and potentially get in the water. And we went during a year that was relatively windy and rainy, and it was early in the season. And it was just one of those years where there was quite a lot of patience required for in-water activity. We had a lot of interesting surface, we'd see breachers and fin slappers and a lot of tail lobs. And, when it's windy, the whales love to breach and spin themselves out of the water, and it's all very lovely. But I knew that my guests really wanted to get in the water. And one of my very best friends in the world was accompanying me. And while we did have a few in water opportunities for flybys and just to see the whales moving, she would stay on the boat every single time. And I'd say, Sandy, come on, get in the water. No, no, no. I'm very content to be where I'm at. Well, I'll kind of complete her story at the end of this story. The night before our last day being on the water, I gathered the group and led them through a guided meditation. And part of the meditation was them envisioning themselves floating in the ocean and being surrounded by whales and just kind of bringing in that beautiful whale energy. And we went into our final day with that kind of that imprint and that open-hearted sense of connecting with whale spirit. Lo and behold, we didn't come across a bunch of whales, but we came across a mother and calf, and the mother whale would kind of keep herself away from our boat to an extent, and she would rest under the water, as mothers do, about 20 feet under the water. And then the calves need to come up to breathe much more frequently than the mothers. So they might be on a 4-minute breathing cycle, whereas the mother breathes every 20 minutes or so. But this mother was staying, again, maybe 4 boat lengths away from us. And finally, the person leading the trip said, well, why don't you try to get in the water and just see what happens? And I remember instructing everybody to just kind of fan out. So it was sort of like if you could imagine birds that migrate with a lead bird and then birds fanning out from the lead. I was in the front and I said, just slowly approach, and nobody really move any faster than me, and let's just see what we could do. And we got in the water and slowly approached, and then I stopped, I want to say 20 yards from her, and she was down under the water and her calf was tucked under her pectoral fin. And I had my hands out in front, open with my palms towards the mother. And I was streaming energy, doing kind of an energy healing, and just thinking to myself to project to her just feelings of love and appreciation and just peace, and conveying to her that we as a group were entering her environment with the essence of peace and welcoming and invitation in our hearts to do whatever she wanted to do. And holding this intention of love and appreciation, we all watched her slowly begin to rise at an angle, coming up, her nose getting closer and closer and closer and closer. So she's at about a 45-degree angle with her nose coming closer and closer, and she stops with her rostrum, her nose, about 18 inches from my hands, from either side of my hands. If I closed my hands together, I could have placed them on either side of her rostrum, and she just stopped. And the people behind me were like, oh, what do we do? And, just keep calm. And for about a minute and a half, I actually closed my eyes and just was exchanging what I felt was loving energy with this mother. And during this time, she's at a 45-degree angle from us on the surface. Her little calf is circling under her and peeking up at our group, and then kind of tucking back under, and then going on the other side and peeking back up. And after that, minute or two exchange, the mother didn't even come up her breast. Her nose just lowered back down. She planed out and drifted just directly under us. And then we kind of moved off so that we were on one side of her. And I always maintained eye contact with the mother. So I positioned so that she could always have that eye contact. And for the next hour and a half, she stayed in that position, and her baby, her calf, came up and would swim by our group, make a circle, look at everybody, drop back down. She would come up every 20 minutes or so and take a breath and maybe move 10, 20 feet and submerge again and stop, and we'd reposition. And we just had the most amazing encounter. And what happened in that exchange, I don't know. I think that I know, but it was profound. And I felt like that was the essence of a mutually agreeable and respectful and loving encounter and agreement to meet and sort of see one another from a soul perspective. So that really stands out as one of my favorite experiences. And my friend,
Wow.
who had stayed on the boat the entire time until this last day, it was the one encounter that she got in the water with.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
yeah.
What an encounter.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So it was worth a week of dealing with the wind and a little bit of rain, and which is part of the package sometimes. And you grow accustomed to looking at clouds and seeing animals in the clouds if you're trying to entertain the guests.
Oh
So,
no.
it made it all
Oh.
worthwhile, which is, those trips tend to be just magical in so many ways. There's always something great that happens, and that's one of my absolute favorites.
That is incredible. Incredible. Man, what an experience. What an experience. And it's so vivid in your memory
It
from
really is. It's one of those where partly because it was one of the, it was in the first few weeks where I had really started doing this kind of thing with whales. I've been in the water quite a lot with a lot of dolphins, and who I absolutely adore. Um, but it really stands out, and just the people there, it was just a warm, loving, fun group. But I have had many other experiences. I had opportunity to be with whales shortly after the passing of both of my parents at separate times, and during those, it was like maybe a week before I was leaving for a whale trip that this trying event occurred. And it seemed like during those times, the whales really responded in very like fashion to what I was going through when my mother passed. That when I was out on the Silver Bank, I just had multiple encounters and pass-bys of mothers and calves, and the mothers would just look very, almost intently into my eyes, and I felt like, wow, what an opportunity for healing. And then when my father passed, him being a much more lively
Mhm.
character, uh, tempestuous, is that a word? And there
Yeah.
were more rowdy groups and frisky whales, and that to me was sort of synchronistic as well.
It's really interesting.
Hmm.
That's really interesting how you can feel that energy
Hmm.
coming from them and how it's matching what's going on in your life.
It so happened on those occasions, yeah.
Yeah, no, your story is incredible. Like that's what this podcast is about. And it's to find those unique experiences in the world that stick with you for years and years to come. And I'm so glad we're talking. I love your story. And why do you think others should experience swimming with humpback whales?
I think that others should experience swimming with humpback whales because, well, it's largely to serve the whales themselves and our planet. What I've observed when people embark on this kind of travel or adventure is that it's so out of the ordinary. In this circumstance, where I like to go, we're on a liveaboard boat. We leave from port and we motor out 85 miles from shore, and there are 3 moorings for 3 operators who have permits to do this. And that in itself kind of pulls people out of their normal day-to-day experience. So if nothing else happens, um, you've broken from your structure, and there's no internet, there's no interference. You're surrounded by water and the stars, and then the experience of stepping on a smaller boat. Sometimes the seas are moving a bit. It pulls people out of their comfort zones in a positive and safe way, And, you're then motoring out and looking and scouting for spouts and whale body parts coming out of the water with the sun glistening on their body parts, whether it's a tail or a pec fin or a spy hopping nose, or just as they arch their back to, come up and take a breath and head back under the beautiful, it's a heart-shaped exhalation, misty blow that they create with every exhalation, starting to scout and train people's eyes to look at the world in a different way. Again, it expands awareness, it expands people's consciousness. And then when they have an opportunity to get closer to the animals, even on the surface, you feel a shift in people where something goes from being, somewhat foreign to recognizable, and then somewhat familiar. And you see people just their level of appreciation grows exponentially. And then if given the opportunity to enter the water, to me, the ocean is it's representative of another level of consciousness. And to me, when people enter the water, it's almost like entering subconscious aspect of the earth. And it's mirrored in a subconscious delving within themselves. And then to be exposed to just a whole different world, the underwater world, and then to have this magnificent 35 to 45 foot creature that's just beautiful and aware and moves so gracefully in the water and so generously will be accepting of another form of life being in their environment. To have that being actually surface and look directly into people's eyes, to me, it shifts something within their hearts and souls. And if they were not proponents for the welfare of marine mammals before, people come out of that situation really not just doing lip service or thinking good thoughts about ocean conservation and preservation of the animals in the sea, but they are changed, and it becomes kind of part of their DNA that they're then inspired to want to protect and want to become more proactively involved in caretaking the earth and its inhabitants. And I've seen people's lives changed by it. I've seen people grow more compassionate. Not only is it an opportunity of a lifetime for each person, but it has this transformative potential for people to really be thinking beyond our race and really embracing another form of life in a very intimate way that I think isn't necessarily possible if you visit wildlife places in nature. There's something very different about entering the water. You're really entering another world with these beings. And
I mean, they say we know more about space than we do even just the world's oceans.
Yeah.
And it really is another world.
It really is. Yeah. And divers have an ongoing taste of this, but even the divers that I know, there is nothing like being face to face with a cetacean, and particularly a whale. They move people. They're just, it's an incredible, it's an indescribable experience. It really is. And I'm a proponent of, when people do decide to do these kinds of activities, while it's very exciting to want to go see and swim with a whale or a dolphin, my orientation is to try to encourage whoever is going to do this to think about what they're bringing to the cetaceans. And I don't mean a gift of a of a toy or an object. It's more, if you could convey to another species something positive and uplifting and a gift, what would it be? Whether it's a kind thought, a compassionate thought, joy, just bringing something to them, gifting them with the presence of your being, the full presence of your being. I've seen animals respond so favorably to that orientation. It's kind of unbelievable.
Hmm. Well, let's get into some logistics
Okay.
so we can let our listeners know how they can make this life-changing, amazing experience of swimming with humpback whales a reality.
Okay.
So first off, where's the best place to swim with humpback whales?
I believe that for me, there are a couple places in the world that make this possible. I gravitate towards the Silver Bank, which is off of the Dominican Republic, in part because you're on a live aboard vessel and you are again you're at home in their home for the duration of the trip, far out at sea, and you just are immersed in whale energy for that duration. I also like the Dominican Republic because there are guidelines and restrictions that limit the number of operators and boats and the number of tenders that can be in the mating and calving grounds of these beings, and also guidelines that really keep in mind and prioritize the highest well-being of the animals. And so for those reasons and the fact that there are many whales around,
Mm-hmm.
that's where I like to go.
Now, I've been hearing Tonga
Mm-hmm.
over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you like about Silver Banks more than Tonga? I mean, I know you just explained it, but
Yeah.
just
I have been to Tonga. I was there last year, and there are some advantages, but also some concerns that I have. Biggest concerns have to do with just the numbers of boats and operators and the lack of any real guidelines that are enforced. I think they operate as many as 35 or 36 permits at a time.
uh-huh.
Um, and it's just an incredible toll, I believe, on those marine mammals to have. And there aren't that many boats that are out at any given time, but there are, good solid 20 boats out at a time, if not more. And then quite a variety in terms of training for both the drivers and the guides, and just a lot of people. There are some things that they do there that wouldn't happen on the Silver Bank. Safety considerations in the way that the whales are approached and the different kinds of encounters that are experienced in water. In some ways, because I'm a very experienced person at this, I could see there's a lot of fun to be had in Tonga. And at the same time, there were some things that really raised some flags for me. It's not to say that I won't go back there, because I very likely will. But given the preference, and then as ecotourism evolves, I'm really seeing the value, for the sake of the animals, of really kind of monitoring ourselves as humans in terms of what we're doing to
Mm-hmm.
Allow the animals to preserve uh, the
Mm-hmm.
integrity of their behavior and not be too impacted by our involvement. So again, I enjoyed being in Tonga, and people I met there were wonderful. But I'm seeing more and more, and as I do this with other kinds of whales and other species in other parts of the world, I am more and more a proponent of restrictions that preserve, again, the well-being of the animals, but also allow for safe and respectful ecotourism in this way.
Now, when should you go to Silver Bank to swim with humpback whales?
The Silver Bank, the season there, it's basically late January through mid part of April, and that's kind of the heart of the whale watching season there. The whales begin to show up, similar to their migration patterns in other parts of the world in the northern hemisphere. There are probably whales showing up there now. I know that there was a mother and calf sighted in Hawaii, and it's kind of a similar timing. But the boats start, the three operators who do have permits out there start to show up kind of more in the heart of that migration and period for them to go to their mating and calving grounds.
Mm-hmm. And how far in advance should you plan to go on this trip?
It's a big trip, and because it's more and more popular, it's something you should plan a year to 2 years in advance. And I know that spaces are limited. I think this coming season is sold out, and even next year is people are very very excited to do this. So it's something you should plan well in advance and also prepare for. Um, you know, even if people are snorkelers, if you haven't been in the water recently, it's a great idea to prepare by testing your gear in the pool a few times, kind of strengthening your snorkeling muscles and reacclimating so you're not having to kind of sacrifice your first day out on the water in reacclimating to that activity.
That's great advice. And we're going to talk about the big question. How much does it cost to do this trip? And how long is the average trip?
Okay, the average trips are format is that people arrive on Saturday, board the boat Saturday evening. The boat motors out to the Silverbank, so you're there on Sunday. Basically, it's a 6-day adventure, basically. And again, you board the boat on a Saturday, you leave the boat the following Saturday morning. So that's the duration. And the cost is, it ranges from about 3,700 to 4,100. And then there are some fees that are in addition to that have to do with cruising and fuel costs, and that runs about another 700 when it's all added in there, and that's based on double occupancy rooms, and then the cost variance is dependent upon the kind of cabin that you would get, and that includes your all meals and basically your time, and you're very well cared for while on the boat. So
Yes,
that's another thing I like about the Silverbank is compared to Tonga, which those are day trips that are run where you have to take some kind of vehicle down to the port and board the boat and go out and come back and then go back to your hotel, figure out dinner, and all that. Basically on the Silverbank, it's just all there. You're on location. And your meals are prepared, your beds are made.
yes,
Happy hour. There's, you're very well fed, and all of that is in place. So
yes, I love liveaboards. I just want to get on, not be connected to internet, and just go have an amazing experience. It's my favorite way to travel.
It's a great escape in a lot of ways, and I love that there's not internet out there. It kind of keeps people present and more interactive. It's interactive with each other and interactive with nature. It's really a great thing. So that's the price range, 37 to 41. Prices kind of creep up as the years go by, just based on cost of living and all of the fun things that we deal with any kind of travel.
Right.
So,
right.
But that gives you a range.
And where and how would you book this trip? Well, where should you go to book this trip?
I would book through aquaticadventures.com is the website. And basically once you get onto the site, it's pretty easy to navigate. It's a beautiful, you're a website optimizer. I think you'll like their website very much. And that kind of guides you through. There's a lot of information about the whales, the vessel that we're on, the schedule, what to wear, what to bring. All of that is detailed out for you. I go with basically the people that started doing this on the Silverbank. This will be their 29th year.
Wow.
Yeah. And I've been with other operators out there. I just eventually gravitated. I think this will be my 8th year with Aquatic Adventures going through them. And, in a good year when there's lots and lots of whales everywhere, all of the operators are having great experiences. Where I would really see the difference would be the leaner years, because it's nature that sometimes more whales migrate there, sometimes there are fewer. And during the years when there were fewer whales from the other boat, I would always see their 2 drivers finding the whales, putting people in the water no matter what. And finally I said, I've got to kind of check it out. And I've been there ever since, and just really feel that they do an exemplary job, and there's consistency among their crew, and they've got a dedicated crew that just does the whales versus having crew members trying to run the main boat and run the tenders each day. It's a blended crew, and so you have people that are doing this basically as part of their full-time annual work and really know what they're doing. So it's a good deal. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, what are the physical requirements or skills needed to go on this trip? Are you scuba diving? Or are you just snorkeling?
Yeah, it's only snorkeling. There's no scuba diving allowed on the Silverbank for this. So I would say snorkeling skills. Do you need to be a strong snorkeler? I would say you need to be comfortable enough to know that you're in open water. There's no bottom to stand on. You're not required to get in the water either. We do have instances where, I've had groups out where, like my friend, she didn't really want to get in the water until the last day. And sometimes people just observe from the surface, because the tenders are right on the water and you are right with the whales. So again, it's not required that you get in the water, but a lot of people obviously do, because that is the opportunity. But you need to be able to get yourself out of the water onto a small boat, efficiently. And that's using a ladder and crawling out. So, a little bit of upper body strength, comfort in the water. And I can't emphasize enough to test out and spend a little pool time if this is not something that is part of your regular routine.
Now, what type of gear should you bring on this trip? And if you don't have gear, can you rent gear?
It's recommended that people bring their own mask, snorkel, and fins. There is limited availability for some kind of a wetsuit. I recommend that if you're going to sort of afford the trip, you do want your mask to fit your face. You want a snorkel that you can breathe out of comfortably and easily, and you want fins that fit. And you're going to do better off usually if you buy your own and take the time to make intelligent purchases. The water is about 78 degrees, so most people are wearing 2 to 3 millimeter wetsuits. And again, it's nice to have your own suit for a lot of reasons.
Right. Right. Hey, you got to stay warm somehow.
Yeah. And so, again, it comes down to fit and comfort. Those are the absolute necessities. You also, the wetsuit provides that sun protection. If you're overheated in that, some people do get away with wearing rash guards. Again, it's mostly for sun protection. That should be a 3 mil suit should be adequate for that environment.
Perfect. And last question is about tipping on a liveaboard. We talked about the costs earlier, and usually at the end of a liveaboard, you have a tip for the crew. What is the recommended tip for the crew?
It does tend to vary. I've noticed with this particular operator that people tend to tip in the 15 to 20% range. It's not required, but people tend to tip pretty generously on these trips. I think in part because the crew does such an excellent job. So I would say 10 to 20% based on the rack rate, not including all the fees, the cruising and fuel, but on that. the rack rate for the room and board.
So you might be looking around like $400 to $800 in tip.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that
Okay.
that's right in the range.
Okay.
That's what I usually tip, in that
Yeah.
range.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always an uncomfortable question. You're trying to figure out like how
It
much and
it is, and I appreciate the question because when I'm personally leading groups, it's a conversation that we have, and I kind of basically have them budget that in, and then it's up to them as to whether they want to actually, exercise that. But I recommend that they budget that in, so there are no surprises. And people do generally, like I say, reward the crew quite generously.
yeah. Oh, and finally, actually, we've got one more. What other tips do you have to our listeners if they want to go swim with the humpback whales?
Tips, it's more attitudinal. You're out in nature and you're dealing with wildlife, wild marine mammals, and it's a very unpredictable environment in terms of your weather and proliferation of whales and their behavior. And so I would just recommend that people go into it very open-mindedly, with a great deal of patience, and with a sense of almost childlike wonderment and delight at whatever happens. And with that attitude, ironically, those kinds of people generally generate
Mhm.
the best experiences. But it's almost a lack of expectation allows for magic to happen. And I've never ever been out there when people haven't left just over the moon with their experiences, with the exception of people that have a certain held something that they absolutely must have. It's like the small bird held in the hand. If you squeeze too tightly, you kind of
Mhm.
squeeze the life out of it. So I would say just bring your appreciation, bring a positive attitude. Just allow yourself to have fun being in the home home environment of just some of the most beautiful creatures on the planet.
Very well said. And I actually have one more question that's been brewing.
Okay.
Yeah, so when you're in the water with the
Hmm.
humpback whales, and
Hmm.
many of them may breach, so do they know, like, is this a problem?
Okay, that's a good question. I'm laughing because um, I've been in the water and observed a couple times them breaching from the water. One of the things that the operators do, which I love, in the Silverbank for safety, is that they will position. They have a guide in the water that's helping to position the gas on a particular side of the whale based on the conditions, and we position in such a way that if the whales breach, they're breaching opposite to where we
Oh, wow. So have you ever had like a weird experience where they got a little close on the breach?
are. I have not. A very dear friend of mine had an experience where they were positioning for other reasons, and did have, I would say, a close call, but it was also very instructive and informative. And in that the whale was extremely cognizant, very aware that there was a snorkeler there, and actually pulled the breach
Oh,
in order to assure the safety of that person. And it was extraordinary. It really was.
wow.
And it was one of those situations where it really wasn't intentional. They were moving to position and happened to be where they were at. And yeah, again, this group, and one of the person doing that was, again, not a guest. And basically we all were amazed and awed at what had happened. But again, it also reinforced why we position the way that we do.
Right.
And and it is pretty interesting to watch them launch from being in the water. The guidelines there created by basically the person that runs Aquatic Adventures. He also has formulated and written the rules for the government there. But they don't put people in the water with breaching animals. It's not like they would,
Right.
drop people in the water in front of a calf that was breaching in your direction, which I did see in Tonga, which really
Oh.
blew my mind. But they just don't do that kind of
Uh-huh.
thing. And these whales had been sleeping. They'd been sleeping for the last, for a good solid hour and a half. So we would get in the water and basically just float over these two, a male and a female, as they were sleeping, and then they would slowly come up and take a breath and then settle back down. And it's just, that's one of the behaviors that's kind of fun to watch if you're if
Right.
you're quite patient, because it's just this beautiful sort of meditative experience. And then lo and behold, all of a sudden, the male just did a little different thing, and made a little circle, and I went, oh boy. And
Oh.
then off he went. But again, it was in the opposite direction of
Yeah.
of the guests. And then the female followed suit seconds later.
Wow.
So yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Incredible.
very interesting. Yeah.
Huh. Well, thanks. I've always wondered. Yeah.
Well, wonder no more. It's anything can happen, but they've had very good fortune on the Silverbank, extremely good fortune in terms of keeping people safe while enabling really, really cool experiences. Because the whales do, particularly the calves, can come very, very close. Um, but we,
Mhm.
we don't, I'm not a cetacean toucher. Some people feel the need to try to touch things, and I
Right.
would find that a breach of uh, uh, well, a behavioral breach, put it that way. Um, and it's not ever recommended that you do that, but they are certainly at times close enough. The babies come in pretty darn close sometimes.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you very much, Susan. It has been such a pleasure having you on the show and sharing your experience as well as how to guide to make this experience happen.
Well, it's been a pleasure to talk with you and reconnect after all these years. We'll have to do another cetacean vacation.
Yes, I'm in.
Great.
Well, thank you so much.
You're very, very welcome.
Thank you so much for listening to Experiences You Should Have. And if you love the show, then definitely go to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review. And also check out the show notes on experiencesyoushouldhave.com. I do a nice write-up of every episode, including links, photos, more information. Everything that was discussed in the show can be found there in the show notes. So experiencesyoushouldhave.com. And you can also look for prior episodes and show notes there as well. So definitely give that a look. And until next time, and hope you listeners out there are having a very adventurous day, or you're planning your next adventure.